The purpose of this video is to just show you how we would assess a range of solutions according to the rubric for this design quiz, help you understand how to look at an HTDF design and see how good a job it is. So we'll just work through a few examples with the rubric right by our side. Here we go. Okay, here's the first solution that we want to look at. And the first criteria is commit ready. And this is about whether the file is neat and tidy, whether things are sitting around that shouldn't be sitting around, things are commented out that shouldn't be commented out, etc. Let's see, there's the signature purpose, they're properly commented out. There's some tests which are not commented out, which is good. The stub and template are commented out. There's the function definition. There's no other stuff lying around in here, so we'll give a good for commit ready. Now let's look at design completeness, and it helps me to put up the recipe steps to do this. So there's the recipe steps, and we'll just go through them. Let's see, there's the signature, and it is there, but it is poorly formed because that comma doesn't belong there. And there's the purpose, and it's good. It sort of has there should be a space right here that isn't there. That's kind of a detail. But you know, we're going to pay attention to details while we do this because that's what helps us do better next time. So, you know, there kind of should be a space there. There's some check expects. They all look well formed. And there is the stub, the template, and the function definitions well formed. And I can tell all that because if I run the program right now, I get to a place where all my tests pass. So that means they were at least well formed. If some of them passed and some of them failed, they're still well formed. But we did have this problem in the signature, these two problems in the purpose. So, you know, since the space problems really are being a little bit too picky, we'll just say there's only one problem. We'll give this a fair, but you might have also given it a poor in terms of design completeness. Now let's look at internal quality. Again, I use the recipe steps to drive me through the design step by step. There's the signature, and it is image to Boolean, which is what it should be. Later on in the course, we'll see examples where there are multiple signatures that could be correct, but really for this function, it's image to Boolean. It consumes two images. It has to produce a yes/no answer. That's a Boolean. The purpose is clear and succinct. It tells me when it produces true. It's very clear about that. Otherwise, it produces false. Now let's look at the tests and whether they're sufficient. And what I have to do now is look at the purpose. I'm going to produce true if the first image is larger, if the height and width are both larger than the second image. So let's think about that. This definition of larger requires comparing the height and width independently. So we can kind of build a little matrix here. The height of image 1 could be less than image 2, or the height of image 1 and 2 could be the same, or the height of image 1 could be greater than the height of image 2. And then that same thing is true for the widths. So there's 3 possibilities for the height and 3 possibilities for the width, and those vary independently, so there's 9 total possible cases here. This function needs 9 tests in order to be sufficiently tested, and here we only have 5. So that's an insufficient number of tests. I don't have to even in some sense go through them to know whether they're sufficient. There can't be enough of them. When I write tests for a function like this, the way I would do it is I would use rectangle in all my tests because that makes it really easy to vary the width and height. So I would write my tests so they look something more like this. Now putting that aside, let's go on. The function name is well chosen. It follows the naming convention in this language that functions that produce a Boolean end with a question mark. It separates words with a dash, which is the naming convention we use in this language. And larger dash image, you know, I feel like that tells me what this function is supposed to do. The stub matches the signature. It consumes 2 parameters. It produces a Boolean. The template matches the signature. It consumes 2 parameters, and it's ... of the 2 parameters. The function body is clear. It's and of greater than the widths of image 1 and 2 and greater than the heights of image 1 and image 2, so that's quite clear. And when I run this program, all the tests pass. And because there's no black or orange highlighting on this when I'm done, it means that the tests covered the entire program. But remember, there weren't enough tests. The tests that are there cover the whole program, but there weren't enough of them. So wrapping up on image quality, everything is great except for an insufficient number of tests, so we're going to score this as good on internal quality. Finally, does this function satisfy the problem statement? Well, it really does. It determines whether one image is larger than another. It has a very clear definition of what that means, so it resolved the ambiguity that so many of you tried to ask about on the forums. They did it here by using the examples to help them surface the ambiguity and making very clear in the purpose what was going to happen here. So we're going to score this as good on satisfying the problem statement. So all in all, this is quite a good solution. It's good on commit ready, it's fair on completeness, it's good on internal quality, and it's good on satisfying the problem statement. If this was your solution, I would feel very, very happy with it. We were pretty picky on design completeness because of those spaces and that comma. So, I wouldn't feel too bad about that if this is your solution. This is a really good job. Here's the second submission that we want to look at. And again, we'll start with commit ready. Let's see, is this file neat and tidy, and is all the commenting proper? Minor detail here, which we haven't really talked about yet, but in our design guidelines, we use 2 semicolons for things that are kind of a permanent part of the file. So these really should be 2 semicolon comments right here. Otherwise, there's the signature and purpose. They're commented out. The check expects are not commented out. The stub and template are commented out. And there's the function definition. It's got this note here in the middle of it, which is sort of scratch work left behind. So this is a very good start. As the person says they got stuck, we'll give it a fair on commit ready. So even though it isn't finished, it's getting points on commit ready. And you'll see as we go on that it will get more points. Let's talk about design completeness. We'll put up the HTDF elements. And here we go. There's the signature. There's the purpose, there's the check expects, there's a commented out stub, a commented out template, and a function definition, but we also need these things to be well formed. So let's try this. We know this isn't well formed, and in fact it's so badly formed that I have to comment it out to test whether other things are well formed. Let's try to run, since that's not there, let's put the stub back and check whether the check expects are well formed. This is how you can check whether the check expects are well formed. You just uncomment the stub and run. And we've got a problem here. Circle is getting too many arguments. Yes, circle only wants a radius, so I can fix that. And let's see, we've got another problem here. Greater than got a image as its first argument right there. Oh yeah, sure, the first argument to greater than is rectangle. Oh, we're calling our function with a call to greater than instead of with 2 images. This probably should be something like this. What I'm trying to show you here is something really important. This person was following the recipe, and that's pretty good. Except they didn't really completely follow the recipe. They wrote examples and they wrote a stub, but they never ran the examples against just the stub. And if they had done that, they would have fixed this call to larger here to look like that. They then would have realized that the stub was missing a parameter. It needs 2 parameters. And lots of other things would have gone better from that point forward. So an important step of the recipe, the reason we write the stub is so that you can run the test with just the stub. Let me go through the rest of this a bit more quickly now. There's enough problems here with the well-formedness in the, I'll just back it out to where it started. There's enough problems here in terms of the well-formedness in the design that we'll get a poor here on design completeness. In terms of internal quality, let's see, the signature, well, the signature is not correct because it doesn't consume 2 images. The purpose is clear and succinct. The examples, it's hard with the examples to say whether they test the function because they're not well formed. But if we kind of pretend they're a bit well formed, 3 by 3 is bigger than a circle of size 1. 3 by 3, the problem is that 9 is the radius, not the diameter. So, this is bigger than that, this is smaller than that, and this is smaller than that. So there isn't the boundary case, the middle case where they're the equal that's not checked. So the tests aren't really quite sufficient. And of course, the function definition itself isn't complete. So we end up at poor for internal quality. And, does this design satisfy the problem statement? Well, there's kind of a rule that we use, which is, you have to you don't lose points twice for the same thing. So, this design kind of does satisfy the problem statement, but it doesn't resolve the ambiguity about what larger means. So we'll give this a fair on satisfying the problem statement. The moral of the story here is following the recipe gets points in the rubric. But much more important than that, follow the recipe helps you make progress. And you really got to follow it. You really got to do things like run the check expects against just the stub. Because when you do that, you find problems that you fix them right then, and it gets you back on the tracks in order to get to a complete design. So if this is your design, this is a really good start, but trust the recipe a little bit more, and you'll get all the way there next time. And this is the last one we'll look at for this week. And, I think you could tell almost kind of right away that this is bad. I mean, it's from the dark side of the force. It's just, sorry. We can't ask ourselves questions about whether the design is complete, or in some sense we can, but there's no signature, no purpose, no check expects, no stub. There's just kind of a function definition. And let me show you something. If I try to run this, it's not well formed. There's a semicolon missing here, probably from the end somewhere. And so this file never ran. And part of why there was no motivation to run it was there was no tests for it to run. So if we do put up our criteria, I guess it's okay on commit ready, but it doesn't do very well on anything other than that. It's not complete. Most of the recipe elements aren't there, so they can't have high quality. The code doesn't run, and I don't know whether it satisfies the problem statement or not because there's no purpose or anything. Really, 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 really. This is not the way we want to program in this course. This is actually pretty close to the right function definition, but it's not the way we want to program in this course. Okay, so this, which in some sense has a better function definition than the previous submission we saw, is actually going to come away with many fewer points. Follow the recipe is the rule in this class. So what you need to do now is take your solution, take the rubric, take this video, and do a self-assessment of your solution according to the rubric. Obviously, you're free to improve your solution before you do the assessment of it. But if you're going to do that, let me encourage you to first do the assessment, then improve it, then do the reassessment. You could submit the higher of the two scores, that's fine, but really take the trouble to do the assessment and figure out how well you did. Because as the problems get harder, if you're not following the recipe well, you're going to have a harder and harder time getting there.